Hi everyone, welcome to the process video for my most recent painting called Land in the Sea, which I finished off right at the end of May for Mermay this year. Here are a few sketches from my sketchbook that got me started. The poses in this one and this corresponding thumbnail were initially what I went with. I also liked these two lower ones because of their open, misty, white feeling of the sea. But I ended up going with the top one because of its simplicity and symmetry, which I thought would be easier to draw. But you'll see later that doesn't really turn out like I think. And I did take my own reference photos for the figures in this painting, so that's why you see me here getting all dressed up in my medieval dress and my blanket cloak, which sufficed very well. I would highly recommend taking your own reference photos whenever you can if you have the subject near that you want to draw. And I was thinking of maybe making a video in future about this, how I take my own pictures and turn them into characters. Though for the background of this piece, I myself am not really near any Scottish wild seas and cliffsides, so those came from reference packs online, which is another good option if you are drawing backgrounds or subjects you don't have on hand to photograph. And now I must say I'm quite proud of myself because as you can see here, I filmed the entire process of the painting, including the initial sketching, which I usually find too hard to film because it just makes me feel self-conscious in my initial inspiration stage. And you know, I think rightly so, because the drawing for this piece went horribly and involved a lot more erasing than usual, with me getting very close to actually giving up on this because I couldn't get a drawing down that I liked. And this was very frustrating because there are a lot of stones here to count and put in their places. And this wasn't without consideration, but I erased all of this and started again a couple times. The composition just really wasn't working for me at this point, so I decided to change up the scenery and even take all new reference photos with more of a 3/4 view. And so I was back at my sketchbook to plan it out a little better this time. But this is something I'm often conflicted about because I might do a sketch and I've got these free, loose, organic lines that just come very naturally and look good. And sometimes it's very hard to recreate that on my final drawing. So then you might think, well, I'll do my free, loose, flowy sketching on my final drawing, but then it doesn't go very well. So then you have to erase it and erase it again and you start damaging the paper, which is not ideal either. So I guess it's something that I just have to practice a bit more, that I can plan a painting and still call back those natural free-flowing strokes that I made the first time I drew it. And here's when the drawing started actually coming together. I realized that I was drawing my characters too small and making the background take up so much focus, and this wasn't what I initially intended for the painting, so I decided I needed to lead with the character drawings and then fill in background around them. And that's when the drawings started to really come together and I could relax a bit more and just go through the motions. So I don't know that I would actually blame the challenging sketching on the fact that I was filming it, though it certainly didn't help my confidence having the camera on while I was struggling with all of this. I imagine it was more the fact that this was quite an ambitious piece for me, with the perspective, the background, and it's always hard to say what part of a drawing you'll find the hardest. In this case, it was sorting out my composition and getting my characters looking right in their poses. But last time the drawing came easily and the painting was a lot of work. Now, there are a number of inspirations for this painting. I guess initially it was just my fanciful idea, thinking about mermaids and humans and that pull that I think a lot of people feel, especially if they really love the ocean, to run to the sea and throw themselves to it, or just stare out at the vastness of the ocean and feel a sort of pull, kind of like Moana, that something out there is calling. And I thought it a pretty idea that maybe a mermaid would feel the same thing looking up at land, and that even the idea of these mystical beings would have their own troubles and their own wishes and dreams. I was unsure of how to portray the seawater in this scene, in a way that certainly represented the ocean but was maybe more manageable for me to paint. And I landed on this very stylized idea that I see a lot in old paintings, really focusing on the sea foam and the swirly shapes it makes with the water in between. And I wasn't so sure about it at first, but I think it looks pretty good. There are a few changes that I would have made that I might keep in mind for next time, but they're pretty minor, and I think all in all it turned out alright. As I prepare to ink my work, I usually like to go in and clean up any lines that are messy or confusing. I don't usually erase my pencil marks, but I do draw quite lightly, and with all the ink and paint going on top, you won't really notice them. So this is more just to help me later on when I'm going in with my ink. I like to have all the necessary marks there so that I don't have to worry as much about the form of an object, and I can spend more time and energy on the quality of my lines. Now, this painting is called The Land and the Sea, and my plan for it revolved around the idea of the two worlds and how different they are, but these characters meeting right where the land meets the sea. So there are a few things that I intentionally did to create some contrast between the two worlds here. On the land side, we have this cliff edge that has these rock formations. I believe they're called basalt columns, which are these tall, pillar-like hexagonal shaped rocks. And they are strong, rigid, stubborn, and firm, much like the solid, stubborn world that we live in. Whereas I've used these flowy, swirly shapes for the mysterious, ever-shifting waters of the sea. You'll also notice that the mermaid has very long, straight hair that's stuck to her body as she's coming up out of the water. And to contrast this, I wanted my human girl to have quite big, wild, fluffy hair that looks more human and swept by the wind, where she is out in the elements. And one last thing I did, which you'll see later on when I bring colour into this, is I used colours to separate them a bit more, with the human girl being more mortal. She has the brown hair, more colour to her skin and the clothes, whereas our mermaid is covered in sea life. Her skin and hair are all this very white, cold, oceany, icy colour, and I also tried to give her a little bit of an otherworldly glow about her, to really set her apart from the way that we know humans to look. Part of the joy of painting scenes like this for me is imagining them being pulled from old fairy tale storybooks. So I try my best to illustrate them well in a way that looks like it's from an old storybook. Whenever I get a comment like that online, it really makes my day, people saying that my art reminds them of old fairy tales. It would certainly be a small dream of mine to illustrate some of those old fairy tale books one day, with those lovely old stories, but then my art alongside it. I think it would be such a wonderful project one day. As I've been pushing myself to paint more backgrounds the last 2 or 3 years, there are a few artists that have stuck out to me, old artists whose work I've admired for a long time, that painted their pictures in a way that really resonated with me, and I could see their backgrounds and understand that if I use this mentality, it's not as hard as I sometimes think it might be. 2 such artists are Edmund Duloc and Arthur Rackham. And some attributes of their paintings that stand out to me are the heavy line work, not a lot of strong lighting. Sometimes there is very good lighting, but often just blocks of colour for a character, solid filling of colours here and there, and a lot of variation of colours very much next to each other. It looks like they use a lot of watercolours that would blend into each other in the background to kind of make you think that the shape is more complicated than it really is. For example, a tree in the background might have some greens and blues for shadows and a bit of reds kind of mixed in together, and with that detailed line work, you can put the colours down pretty easily and make it look more advanced than you would think. I have certainly found this when I started thinking of backgrounds in this mentality and large shapes as just blocks of colours, and really used my inking to carry the structure of the piece. And so I know everyone learns things in different ways and this style might not be for everyone, but I thought I would share their work with you and how it's really helped me in case you're also looking for a way to advance your backgrounds or just understand them a little better. I know for myself it was really a moment clicking in my brain that I started to see backgrounds in this way, that I could paint them a little more simply with just blocks of colours rather than defining every single detail, which can be daunting if you're just getting into them. As you can see with me painting the rocks right now, I'm implementing some of those techniques. I started by just putting down these large washes of colour, greys and browns, and wherever I'd see some colours more here and there, I'd put them, just softly blending into each other. And then later on, I can go in on top of that and define my shapes more, adding some shadows and depth. But a lot of my work is done for me, and I find the initial painting the hardest part, knowing where to put your colours down on your white page. So for pieces that don't have a lot of strong lighting, like this is a very overcast piece, it works well for me to just fill all my white space first with colour and then go around darkening little areas here and there. There are a few scenes from a book that have stuck in my mind ever since I read it, and I think played a part in the inspiration for this painting. The book is called Mermay by Carolyn Turgeon. The book is a retelling of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, and it stays very close to the original, so I don't think there's any chance of me spoiling it for anyone. But there are a few scenes at the start where a princess human character is at this convent out in this icy, cold, greyish countryside, and she stands out watching the ocean and describes it in such a beautiful way, very similar to how I've tried to capture it here. Cold, overcast, the churning seas, and she's rugged up with her coat against the cold looking out, and this is when she sees the little mermaid who's bringing the prince ashore, and they have this moment. And me doing this painting really brought that scene back into my head where we have the human and the mermaid character kind of at the edge of each other's worlds, seeing each other and their worlds for the first time. I also really liked the idea of having my human character in this painting be a girl. As much as I love the idea of our romantic human mermaid couple, the strong handsome prince and the little mermaid girl, I do think oftentimes now and probably throughout history and certainly in stories, it's often the girls and the ladies who are more enchanted with the idea of mermaids and fairies and all things feminine and mysterious. Certainly not all the time, but I do think it's overly portrayed, our human man character looking down at the mermaid and there's this romance, but I wanted this to just portray the idea of two girls in different worlds who maybe are enchanted to see each other and a world they maybe long for. I wanted to say, you remember how at the start I said the sketching for this was quite challenging? Well, this painting stage was quite the opposite. Certainly compared to my last 2 or 3 paintings where I felt I spent a long time with my watercolours, building up the layers, not quite sure where to darken, where to lighten. I was pretty sure about this one. It came very easily, 1 or 2 days, and I was finished the painting, which is quite unusual for me where I've been spending more like a week on a big painting like this. So there you go, what I lacked for ease in the beginning of this process, it made up for at the end with a very easy painting. And I had such a wonderful time painting it because on those 2 or 3 days that I was painting, our rain finally came in for autumn. It's June now and we've hardly had a drop of rain and we have no grass, and even where I live in the south of Australia, though it is dry, we do have very wet winters and cold, and it's just been so late with no grass, and I've been waiting for this rain, and it was so wonderful to paint my cold greyish ocean scene with the rain pelting down around me outside. And I was enjoying myself so much that I didn't even really want the painting to finish. It's just that May was coming to an end and I wanted to get this finished within the window of Mermay. And I ended up posting this on the 1st of June actually, but I didn't want to rush all this right at the end. I did take my time these last couple days. And the last piece of inspiration is a poem that I actually wrote myself before and alongside painting this. And I guess I like to think of it as a companion to the painting. I haven't actually written any poetry for a long time, so I was a little out of practice and unsure if I should share it online because I never really have before, but I didn't want to let anything stop me from going ahead with that, and I thought I would share it here now with you to close off this painting video. Would a mermaid forlorn, clasped in white-capped waters hold, think to wash herself ashore, not at home anymore in the crushing cold? For the roiling turmoil inside me pleads I run to open sea. She's kept from dry land, within shimmering walls, as I swim till the shore disappears, my feet staying moored to that sand. And in the deep she had no tears, while I've drowned in salt for years. If we met at water's edge, where wind and waves have led, I'd beg to trade the lives we fled, that land should take one in my stead, and ocean's grip would let her go, so I may swim below. Thanks very much for coming along with me through the process of this painting. I hope this video has somewhat inspired you or just given you a moment of peace. It's been a wonderful May full of many mermaids and paintings, and I do have some fun things planned for June, so keep an eye out for that. Prints of this are now available. If you go to the link below to my shop, you can see them there. And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.